So yeah, I'm Chloe. I was a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Melbourne, and I've recently finished up that role, and I'm now an honorary research fellow. And I want to talk to you about the CoastSnap projects that I've been working on over there. But just to give you, I guess, a little bit of background info so you know why I'm doing the project and give it a bit of context. So my role at Melbourne was the lead numerical modeler on the Victorian Coastal Monitoring Programme. And this programme was a big programme. We were looking at a number of priority sites along the Victorian coast. You can see the outline of it there, where we have hotspots of erosion or flooding, and the government were concerned about why these sites were changing so much, how they were changing, what they might look like in the future, and how we can best manage them. So we had quite a big team. We were all doing different things. Some of the modelling work that I was doing is shown in the bottom left area. We were collecting heaps of data. We had a huge wave buoy network that was deployed. We were collecting sediment samples, and we were doing a lot of citizen science work as well. So the image just above where Apollo Bay Marengo site is part of our citizen science drone survey, and I'll mention that again a little bit later on. But that's where my work came into it. So I was doing the modelling, but I was also heavily involved in that sort of engagement side of the programme as well, to make sure that the science we were doing was being translated out to the communities. And one of my key sites that I'm going to focus on was Inverloch. So you see that sort of towards the east. And this is what that site looks like in a bit more detail. So Surf Beach, which is labelled there, was a hugely erosional site. It was being eroded by many metres per year. The section between Point Norman and Point Hughes, all that sediment seemed to be moving towards there into the mouth of Anderson Inlet. And that area was changing and evolving quite a lot over sort of, I think it was about 40 metres over a 10-year period or something was recorded. So you can see that in some of these images here. If you look sort of right in the centre of the image, you can see a big sand deposit. And as you go from 2010 through to 2014 and all the way through to 2020, you can see that area changing a lot. So part of my work in this area, we were using models to look at how and why it changed. And as I said before, we were using citizen science drone surveys to look at this section of beach and how it was changing as well. So here's some of our volunteers. They were trained to use the drones, and then once they'd received all that formal training, they went out every 6 weeks and surveyed the sites. And we had about 16 sites, I think. When I left, we were up to about 16, all along the Victorian coast, where we had lots of these drone surveys happening. And this was great. I've been doing a piece of research recently, the image in the top right hand corner, where I've been collating all of those drone survey images and looking at beach volume changes and things like that. But having spent a lot of time at these sites and speaking to people in the communities and working with the conservation groups, I could really see how, yes, 6 weekly surveys are great, but a lot of the changes were occurring at the event scale. So we'd have a big storm come through, and then we'd see big changes in how much of the dune was eroded, the beach level, and so forth. So whilst all the data we were collecting was great, I really wanted to have a bit more high temporal resolution. And this is where the CoastSnap project came in. So CoastSnap is a community-based beach monitoring programme. It was initially started back in 2017 as a collaboration between the University of New South Wales and the New South Wales government. So the whole idea of the project is that you take photos of the coast and you use it to capture and quantitatively measure dynamic coastal changes using this citizen science-based approach. So I wanted to look at, I guess, franchising that out, or installing a station down at my Inverloch site. And like I said, it's very simple. It essentially involves installing a phone cradle that points towards the beach, looks along the beach, and then members of the public come along and take photographs from this spot, submit it to us via social media, and then we collate all of those images for analysis. And since the photos are taken in the exact same position each time, because we use the phone cradle, we can overlay them, use ground control points to align the images perfectly, and measure how the beach changes through time. So from a scientific perspective, we can look at things like change in shoreline position. So this is another site. This isn't Inverloch. This is up near Sydney. So the solid line represents the present shoreline taken in the image, and then the dashed line shows the previous position of the shoreline. So you can see how dynamic these systems are. We can use it to look at storm response, which is, like I say, something that I was particularly interested in. So the blue line is after the storm and the red line is before the storm here. So you can see how much sediment is infilled sort of closer towards the camera. And you can also look at things like beach width changes and beach face slope changes as well, and get all of those quantitative metrics. And not only that, we're not only able to collect this valuable scientific data about how the coastal system changes, but we have this incredible opportunity to engage with the local community. It's all about involving the community in taking photos, collecting the data, and then we can open that conversation about, you know, what the coast is doing. We can get them to look at the environment from a more analytical perspective, as opposed to just visiting the beach. If they take a photo, or particularly if they take repeat photos, they're looking at the coast all the time, more from our point of view, as we look at it as scientists. So the CoastSnap station in Inverloch was installed in January 2020. So I got a grant to be able to do that. And here's just a small collection of the photos that were submitted in the first 3 months of its lifetime. We're getting about 1 photograph a day. At the last point I checked, we had about 10 repeat contributors, and we run a lot of it through Facebook. So we have about 130 followers on Facebook. And considering that Inverloch is a very small coastal town, there's about 5,000 residents, but a lot of those are holiday makers. So there's a lot of holiday homes down in Inverloch. It's one of the attractive places to go for people from Melbourne. I think we're doing pretty well. And we ran a lot of promotion as well. So we were working closely with the local conservation society. So I did some work with them in addition to the CoastSnap project. So I already had sort of connections with them, and they were super interested. They actually are a lot of the repeat contributors, and they promote the site as well. And with me living in Melbourne, which was about a 2.5 drive away from this site, it meant having someone there as well that sort of kept check on how things were going and talked to people on a regular basis. We also recorded some videos. And again, that was really good. Like I say, it's a very small site. So when I'm walking through the town, recording some of those videos to talk about the project, I had lots of people interested in what I was doing. I went and did some promo at the community centre, and just generally stood at the site and spoke to people as they walked along the boardwalks. There was a lot of foot traffic in that area. And just in front where you can see the sands there, went out, you know, drawing big images on the sand, and drawing big arrows along the site to show people where it was, just to get the conversation flowing and get people interested in what I was doing and contributing. Because really the success of the project is all based on engagement. If we have no engagement, we have no photos and the project fails. And this was really interesting. This was some data I was looking at recently about how many photos we were getting over last year. So the first year that the project was installed. So we had heaps in January, right at the start of the project. And then we had lockdown. And of course, people couldn't really go out and take photos, or people weren't going to Inverloch on holiday. So there weren't many people around and that sort of thing. So we definitely had this drop off of photos. And in June, we actually had a lifting of lockdown. I mean, you may have heard we had some quite severe lockdowns in Melbourne. But June lockdown was lifted for just a couple of days. So you can see a little peak in the data there, which I thought was really interesting. And then November, December, we started to open up again. So the numbers are going up. And it's really interesting to see, carrying on from this point, how we fluctuated in and out of short lockdowns over the past 8 months or so, and how that's reflected in the data too. But it's great to see that people are still engaging, and that it hasn't sort of been too severe for the project. So we've had a lot of engagement with the project, like I've said, and we are continuing to do that. A lot of the results and a lot of the data we're looking at, and even just images that we take, we update on the Facebook page regularly. We've had articles written for newspapers. We've had, or I've done a few radio interviews, and had people contact me to say, can I speak about the project at different events and things like that. So that's been great. With doing my postdoc, I had connections. The funders were the Victorian government, so they saw what I was doing and they've picked it up, and they're now looking to install a whole number of CoastSnap sites along the whole coast. One, for the scientific data, that's really valuable, but also because it's a way to engage with the local communities and speak to them. One of the things that I found really interesting from the project, the Facebook posts are great, and I think we get the majority of our engagement through Facebook as opposed to email or Twitter, or there is a new app that's come out for it, so that's got a lot of engagement too. But I really like getting the emails because people tend to put a bit more detail on, particularly the repeat contributors. I have one person in particular who at first just sent the photographs through with the date of when the photograph was taken, but now he also attaches his own little analysis to it. So he'll say it was a particularly windy day today, or the tide level was really high. It sort of started like that, and then he started saying things like, we had a big storm last week and the dune looks much further back than it was previously, or the beach level seems particularly low today, and that sort of thing. So it's really encouraging to see that the benefits of having something like this, and like I was saying before about encouraging local community to actually look at these sites differently, is really great. And I'd be really interested to see how that impacts their perspective on things like management of these sites going forward. And I have had some questions about that actually as well through the email. So that's all I've got. Sorry, Chris, I've run a little bit over. But yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed seeing this project flourish. I'm looking forward to seeing hopefully some more sites going up in the UK.